Try that link.
What's that?
Try that link that I just sent you, the new one.
Okay.
I think we're live on YouTube right now. Just yeah, it works on my end.
Okay, I'll just post this on Facebook, then you can invite Terry, and off we go.
Take off your mic right now because it's live.
Hello there, Dan.
Terry, how are you?
Just dandy, thank you.
We're live on YouTube right now. So
Well, happy Friday to you.
to you as
To
well.
anybody else that might be observing this.
How are you today? Busy?
Good. It's been a busy day today. Yeah. Lots of client meetings, sort of getting geared up. How about you?
Busy.
Hey
getting
Terry,
ready for the
good to
weekend,
meet you.
yeah. Brian,
nice
this
to
is
meet you as
Terry.
well.
So we're actually live right now on YouTube. So whatever we say is on the internet.
All right, I'll be good.
Okay, so I'm going to share the link on my Facebook page, and Bomb, you have yours on yours. You have it on yours right now.
Yeah, Terry, if you go to my YouTube page, you can click on the link right at the bottom and share that as well.
All right.
I'm going to apologize to everybody that's watching in case one of my daughters runs behind me and asks for food or something.
Okay, I'm gonna start recording in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're good to go right now. Hey folks, how's everyone doing? We really appreciate you being here. Dan and I are good friends in the real estate industry, and one of the things we've been noticing is that I don't think a lot of press is happening on the hardships restaurants are facing, especially in the area, you know, we drive by, we're getting takeout, some of them are closed, and it's hard to get an idea of what people are facing, the challenges and everything else. So we have Terry here, who's a good friend of Dan, and I'll let Dan introduce him. Dan, so take it from here.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've known Terry for 20 years from my restaurant days. He brings over 30 years experience from not only the restaurant business, but the hotel business. He sat on the executive team at Sheraton Hotels here at Sheraton Toronto. He was the VP of Operations of Care Operations and Surcorp. He started his own hospitality leadership recruitment group that's now based out of Vancouver. He speaks at George Brown College and at Ryerson University, and he runs a consult. He's a restaurant consultant for new concepts that want to open. So if there's anybody that has his ear to the ground with what is going on in the hardships facing the restaurant business, it's Terry. So Terry, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
I wanted to start, sorry, Brian, I just from the top line, I wanted to know, I was thinking about this right as we went on camera. I want to know when you first thought, okay, there is a problem here. There's a big problem that's going to affect my industry. You know, it was about 2 months ago. I remember for me when that NBA game, when they called all the players in, and I turned to my wife and said, this is big. And I wanted to know, when was the first time you got that sense?
Yeah, well, it'd be around the same time. I mean, the hospitality industry, restaurants, I think we're a hardy bunch, and we're used to impacting anything, you know, changes in labor, weather, Any kind of event that's going on can impact or hurt construction, all kinds of things. So we weather all kinds of things. But yeah, I think it's, in the mid-March, I think that 12th, 13th, when games started to get canceled, travel restrictions started to come in, and we started to see, and especially in Toronto, where we lived through SARS, and it didn't impact a lot of other big markets, but it impacted us. You could see exponentially what was happening. I think everybody was shocked at how quickly it happened, that within a day. But I think up till then, the industry, hotel, restaurants, we're all into health and safety. We're all looking at how we look after things, and we were looking at the different elements, and re-emphasizing the procedures we have in place for that. But it was around that mid-March when we really started to see the spread, and we started to see the unprecedented lockdowns and restrictions coming, that we went, all right, this is going to be big and unprecedented for us.
So what kind of impacts have you been seeing? Have people been surviving with just takeout, or a lot of people just closing and during this time trying to work out some things with their landlords? Like, what have you been seeing on how they've been kind of working through this?
Well, all of the above, right? I think we're seeing everything. And there's no question that when you look at the hospitality industry, we are on the catastrophic side of the impact of this. That other businesses, you can start to see how they can ease back in. But when you're a high touch, high impact business like ours, right away, it's been a horrible mess. And so we're looking at right away the complete lockdown, where all the businesses have stopped. And you see in that particular case, no revenue. These businesses are not, whether they're small or even medium sized, they don't carry cash flow that can leave them extended without revenues. High fixed cost, low margin businesses. They're not designed to be running 3 months, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months without any revenues at all. And so that's why we're seeing everything. We're seeing some landlords and some business model. The restaurant business model was great. They were able to react quickly. They've got a good landlord. They've probably got a good business model or branding, or perhaps deep enough pockets that they were able to do the right thing out of the gate. To the other side, where almost immediately we saw notices of, we've been closed a week or two and we're never going to open again. And so we're seeing the whole gambit of it. I'm a big fan of Danny Meyer out of the United States, and Union Square Cafe. And, we forget, and it's times like this where we realize that the hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, food service, we're one of the top employers, but we're not an airline. We're made up of a whole myriad of small companies. And the workforce that was taken out of the mix right away, you lose their ability to purchase, their ability to go out things, offices shut down. So it's been catastrophic. And then now, as we see, some people are doing takeout, taking advantage of all the online things that were already growing are growing. But if your business model wasn't designed to be an online business, an online food service business, you're really just eking out things. You're keeping some people busy. You're covering some costs, but really it's a loss all the way across if you're not designed to do that out of the gate.
So when they're starting back and they're kind of in the hole for 2 months, what kind of implications does that leave with getting supplies, getting getting the ingredients and everything else from suppliers when they've been burning through kind of cash, paying the rent, or just keeping their building in place? How are these businesses going to get back up and running?
Well, it's a great question. And I think you're going to see different elements across the board. If you look at out in British Columbia, the Restaurant Association has been able to put together a large group of restaurateurs that have worked directly with the government. And they're working on what should the relaunch protocols look like? What should the stages look like? I love the fact that the British, out in BC, the government said, look, we're not restaurateurs. We're not the hospitality people. We need you to help us figure this out. And I think, you know, the shorter answer to your question is partnerships, that everybody's in this together. The good thing is, at least from a supply chain standpoint, is people still have to eat. And while they may not have been dining out, the shift of the supply chain over to the grocery and from our food manufacturers and supply chain to start to go directly to guests uh, kicked in. I mean, we're seeing grocery stores and starting to do massive deliveries. We're still going to grocery stores. We're starting to see meat vendors and vegetable vendors and seafood vendors go directly to customers with delivery. So they're already in the mix of delivering food. They'll obviously have to ramp up to have the right number of people through their distribution centers to be able to, if everybody clicks and goes back online, but it's going to be a progressive relaunch. Individual restaurateurs are going to have to work. They're going to have to work with their banks. They're going to have to work with their landlords. When you deplete your inventory and you suddenly got to kick back up again, and you have probably 2-3 weeks of training to bring all your team back and get them retrained and refocused on health and safety measures, and then you've got the added cost of any additional distancing measures that you may have to put in place or changes to your business, plus the physical inventory, you're going to have to work on longer payment times and being able to get cash together to be able to relaunch those things.
Can you give us a sense of what kind of numbers we're talking about for those inventory that the restaurants are carrying? So StatsCan released a number, their April numbers, where there was almost 100,000 food service businesses that went out of business. 100% of those, 94% of those had payroll under $1 million. So when you look at quick service restaurants, the small mom and pop restaurants, what kind of food inventories are they carrying that were perishable and that they have to find the money to get back to open up again? Will they be limited menus? Will they be, like, how do you see that happening, and what kind of numbers are we looking at?
Well, it's a great question, and I think you're going to see it across the board. I mean, Restaurants Canada, I think, they've been awesome at supporting the industry and coming out with data on a regular basis. Encourage people to go and check out their site. They've been talking about I think the last survey, that 7 out of 10 operators, whether you're independent chain or whatever, won't be able to make, if this goes beyond, the next 2-3 months in terms of closure. In terms of what they have to do to ramp up, a small restaurant may need, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 just to get going. The bigger restaurants with alcohol and food, their basic inventories may cost them $10,000 or $20,000 to get going and start ramping up. And so the process will be very different across the board. It also, keep in mind too, we're not flicking on a switch, and we're not, may have been flicking a switch to shut them down, but it won't be the same way to turn them back on again. People's lives have been disrupted. People that lost their jobs, maybe they've had to move back home, maybe they've had to move to different areas. All those hourly teammates that need to be brought back in, there's the cost of bringing them and starting them back up again, and getting it going from there. So there's a big startup cost. And we also don't know what the consumer behavior will be. There's a lot of fear out there. And so, our industry, first and foremost, has always been about health and safety, but it's about making sure that we can provide a safe environment for our teammates to come together and work and feel comfortable and safe, provide a product that we know that we can serve to guests, and in an environment where they feel comfortable to come and have it be healthy. And so whether that's takeout or dine in, and I think we all know that. I think it was, one of the individuals out in BC said, "Look, we're not going to have mass gatherings this year," and I think that's true. And so it's looking at how we progress. Is it 10%? Is it 50%? And keep in mind that you look at your favorite neighborhood restaurant that maybe has 50 seats. In a lot of cases, it's the old adage that they might be open, if they're open 7 days a week, it's probably Saturday sometime, maybe late Saturday evening, when they're finally going into the black. It's taken them all week just to cover their costs, all week to cover their fixed costs and labor and cost of sales and things like that. And so when you then say, well, they can only have half the people in there, you can kind of see quickly that the margins and they're going to have a difficult time, that this is going to ride out as the lag happens for the bounce back of the restaurant and the hospitality industry.
So basically, they're open 6 days a week, and only on the seventh day they start making a profit and start after paying off everything. So we're into this a couple weeks. That I mean, are they going to be able to come back if they burning through all this cash? And what's going to happen?
Well, you know, I mean, the honest answer is that some won't. I mean,
Yeah.
there's going to be, and we've already seen it in the news that there's things that are closing, and they won't be able to overcome it. And then you've got good restaurant brands that were that had stronger pockets and will have the legs be able to come see it. And then we're going to see everything in between. We're also going to see the fact that quite a number of concepts are going to pivot, and they're going to pivot to figure out what does the new normal look like and what does their product offering look like. And you know, one of the things I should say is if we don't, if you want to know any more about the industry and the metrics around it, I think it's Paul Schufeld. He has Works Burgers, and he got a lot of claim on Instagram when he sent out a feed where he does an awesome job of talking about the metrics that restaurants go through, and that, you know, the average restaurant makes 5%, you know, for every dollar that's spent. By the time we pay for cost of the product, cost of labor, cost of the rent and linens and all those sorts of things, you know, we're left with, a good restaurant is left with about 5 cents on the dollar. And anyway, it's a great example of that. And so, you know, your original question is we're going to see quite a number of things. We're seeing some really great businesses pivot to online, setting up ghost kitchens and really embracing the takeout delivery side of it, and are starting to make some headway that way. Others, I think, is your original question, we're going to see smaller menus. We're going to see different cost structures on how they're delivering that sort of thing. We're going to see different service models in terms of how we're staffing. And the guests are changing their perceptions on what they'll be expecting when they go out. So all those things will come together as we slowly start to come. Some won't make it, some are going to flourish.
When you were talking about such small margins this week, some of the food delivery services got some bad press, particularly Uber Eats, when they're talking about 20, 30, even 35% commission required to bolt the service. And some restaurants, Il Fornello was one of them, that said, we're not going to participate in that. What was your thought when you heard that news, and what did you think about that?
Well, it's not surprising, and I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about delivery and Uber Eats. I'm not a fan of Uber Eats, and I'm not a fan of it because I honestly think that their service is inconsistent. You know, they've had technical issues and blackouts that really have hurt different things, and there's been lots of that in the press. But over and above that, you know, when you look at, we've come into an era where the consumers, you know, years ago, we wanted to make a good food product that we could make some money off of and get it out to the table, have people love it, crave it, want to come back to it. Well, now we have to do all that, but we also have to figure out how to get that item to your couch at almost any time that you want to have it. And it's a different model. And so delivery is here, online ordering is here, and you know, that's not going to go away. But I think as operators, there's different pieces to it. I think we're seeing the emergence of ghost kitchens, or, you know, the types of kitchens that may not have a physical presence, but are geared towards, they're perhaps in a more suburban area or industrial area. They're not paying top rents. They've designed a kitchen not for aesthetics, but for execution. They're able to have either brand name products or new products and be able to execute the heck out of it. And they're designed to make money, even with the commissions. When you look at the vast majority of restaurants, you know, instead of saying, looking at it as an incremental piece. So I've built my restaurant to do so many customers a week and be full 7 days a week and have that dine-in experience. And oh, by the way, I can also do some delivery. And yes, maybe I'm not making the same money out of it, but it helps offset fixed costs. It helps marketing. It helps give me exposure in a neighborhood. But the problem comes is when you're using Uber Eats or any of the deliveries to replace the income of a dine-in guest, you're going to be making less money off of it. Yes, you know, a restaurant can mark up, if on Uber Eats, they're probably marking up their menu prices by 10% or 20%. It doesn't cover all the commission. But when you're trying to replace revenue on a regular basis of what guests would have paid inside your restaurant or inside your building, the model doesn't work. And a lot of restaurant concepts, instead of saying, what do I have to do to create a better business model for guests to come into my restaurant on a regular basis, you know, that's where I think the bigger problems come. If I'm paying top rent downtown for a location for a high traffic area, I shouldn't be depending on Uber Eats, where I'm giving away anywhere from 10 to 20 points. I shouldn't be counting on that as part of my business model to drive my revenue. And I think that's where the disconnect comes.
Especially since the margin are 5% and they're charging what, almost, they're charging more than 30. So it's almost like just like a branding thing, or like, hey, here's our restaurant, hoping people like it enough to come in. Is that the way that restaurants are looking at it?
Well, right now, I mean, if you look at anything, it's about top line. I mean, people are scrambling to survive and bring in top line. So even if they're gonna, you know, right now there's nobody dining out, there's nobody walking by, there's nobody working in an area. If you look at a lot of restaurants in downtown Toronto, let's say anything, the food courts, any of the fast casual, they probably do anywhere from, you know, probably 60 to 80% of their revenue between 12:15 and 1:30. Well, it's gone. There's nothing there. But they still have rents to pay. They still have fixed costs, or they're trying to keep some of their team members employed and keep working. Well, they're going to drive revenue any way they can, even if you know, they're at a lower margin. It's more of a survival, but it's a downward slide. You know, you're not made, it's not profitable. And unless, you know, where I think you look at some of the business models like a ghost kitchen, where they've said, you know, we're going to get the price, we're going to build the 30% commission, or, you know, some of the other deliveries may have more like 20% commissions. We're going to build that into our cost structure. Well, if we're paying less rent because we're not in a high traffic area, we're more in an urban industrial area. If we're not paying money for decor, if I'm not doing delivery up front and I'm just focused on my kitchen team, you can lower your costs down so that that makes sense. But if you're like a lot of these restaurants have a dining room, you know, they may have 5,000 square feet or, you know, 10,000 square feet. You know, what do you do with all that? There's no way you're going to be able to drive the revenue to do that.
How much does it typically cost to fit out a restaurant, both in decor and the equipment in the back? Do they just kind of take over a location and just put some paint on it? Like, what typically do most of these people do?
Well, again, you're going to see everything, right? You're going to see the ones that, and you've probably seen them in your neighborhoods where, you know, sometimes in the industry, we call it lipstick on a pig, that, you know, that you change the sign and you slap some paint on, and really what was different from the old place? Well, nothing. And then you're going to see the opposite, where someone will come in and completely renovate. I think the smart ones are the ones that looked and said, well, why did the business close? Sometimes you might look and say, you know, you probably in your neighborhoods, you've looked at something and said, wow, that place was busy all the time. It was always busy. How did it close? Well, they didn't have their internal processes in place so that they were profitable. Or maybe the owners got into a squabble and that kind of thing. So if the top line was right and someone new coming in was able to look at it and say, you know, we can tweak this and staff it better, or we can tweak this so that the kitchen execution is a little smarter, or we can do catering to offset some costs, or we can do some of that, then, you know, you may see the business open almost as it was. But if you go in and say, listen, you know, we built a restaurant concept that people in that neighborhood just didn't like. Or we charged, you know, we opened a fine dining restaurant in an area that really was meant to be more casual. And, you know, people didn't like it. then you have to really look at that and say, well, is that worth trying to reopen that the same way? Or do we need to tweak it in some way? And that's where you might start to look at bigger costs in terms of changing it around.
Hmm.
I was going to save this question till the end, but now you brought up you opened it up. I was arguing with Mortgage Jake, who Brian knows, about opening a restaurant right now. And, he was sort of taking the position that why would anybody open a restaurant? And I wanted to get your take on, if somebody came to you and said, I really want to do this, it's been my lifelong dream, what advice would you give them now if it'd be different from perhaps, 3 or 4 months ago?
Well, it's interesting that, a lot of the advice is the same. When people come, it's like, well, why do you want to open the restaurant? And, I think we've all been around people that have, I always thought I'd open a restaurant. It'd be so cool. I could hang out with my friends and, and do all this stuff. And they really don't know anything about the business. So, the hospitality industry is probably no different than a lot of other ones. If you want to be great, it's not for the lighthearted, and you got to be ready to work. The big thing is looking at, are you creating a business? Like, why do you want to get into it? Are you ready to work at it? Are you just looking at a general investment? I think that there's lots of other things you could be looking at to invest your money in. But having said that, if you have a passion for the industry, or you have a passion for a particular product, or you have an idea, a lot of times I work with clients to, well, let's flush that out. Is there a business model that can work? And I think that's the number one is it's almost that proof of concept early on to say, how many guests do we need to serve it? What could we be charging them? What's the product going to look like? And then what does labor look like? And we set up the parameters to be able to move the business forward. There's no question that, it's not like sharks swimming around, but in any downturn, there's opportunity. There will be opportunities on the other side of things. But I think in our industry, it's about being great. Are you really going to knuckle under and create something different? And do we think that there's a business model to it? And how are you going to pivot and understand the circumstances? So, there's a concept in the United States called Sweet Greens, and they're a great salad, fresh, health option. And one of the things they do is they do something called outposts, where they will set up almost like a bookshelf type unit in malls. They'll set it up in office buildings. They'll set it up in condos. They'll set it up in all kinds of different areas. And you can place your order with them, by 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they'll say, look, it'll be delivered in this area for you between 11 and 2. It's low touch. It's really convenient. They're doing it themselves, so they're not paying any commissions. They've figured out a way to be able to deliver it. And so it's a great example of doing a pivot that may very well have some great legs and some great profitability for them come the new sort of no touch environment.
So it looks like there might be some opportunities with ghost kitchens. It looks like people should maybe focusing on, building a brand, because they're not going to have that street frontage where people could just walk in and find it, or they're going to have to do some social media outreach, some advertising and some branding to be able to build that. Do you see that being viable, the ghost kitchen models, the Sweet Green model, and doing interesting things with technology and just the opportunities that these deliveries are opening up for us?
Well, I do. And, I think that all businesses need to think of this in terms of an immediate term, a midterm, and then, a long term. And probably long term, I would look at it from the perspective that there's a vaccine out there, or that, the fear of catching something, of, the consequences of catching it, the fatalities that are happening. When we get to a point when, and I believe that at some point in the future, we will have that, where there will be confidence back, where people will feel comfortable to come together in large groups, go to sporting events, go to concerts. I'm not saying that there may not be some protocols in place that will be long lasting, but if we say that eventually that will get there, then it's how do we build towards it? And I think that there are some things that will go by the wayside that people are putting in. Will we all be wearing masks? Will we be putting plexiglass separations between guests in a dining room? Will that be there forever? I doubt it. So what does it look like in transition from there? I think when it comes to the ghost kitchens, I think in terms of retail, in terms of consumer behavior, I'm not an expert all the way around, but if you look at a lot of it, we were becoming an online culture. We were, whether it's, ordering clothes online, Ubers online, anything, we were doing everything online, banking online. We now have had an anywhere from 8 to 16 week period where we've been forced to go online in way more dramatic ways. And so I think that was already on an incline, and it's dramatically risen. And I don't think it's going to, fall incredibly. It may not be, it'll be further than it was before the pandemic hit. And I think that will also work from the food service standpoint. I think that there are people that, for instance, I never ordered groceries from any of the major grocery chains and had it delivered to my home before. I never saw a need to do it. I like to go shopping. We've had to do it this time. And it's now something like, you know what, I could see doing it once in a while now, where I never would have done before. So you're going to see behaviors across the board. I think ghost kitchens are a trend. I think that the consumer desire to be able to have what they want, when they want it, where they want it, is not going to go away. And you can see that. I think some of the technology, I mean, we've heard about restaurants in the States, from Domino's across the board to Amazon, getting in the food business, where they have drones and, autonomous vehicles. I think that was a trend. I think it's going to continue. But I also don't think that, we're social beings, and I can see people, I bet you that there are people right now that if full service restaurants opened right away, they'd be out there tomorrow. And then you're going to see everything in between. So it will continue to climb, and it'll be interesting for us to see, because of this 12 to 16 week change in behavior, which ones will stay and never go back, and which ones will go back to the way they were before. It'll be interesting to see.
Do you see legislation catching up to restaurants that are able to pivot? Like, we've seen the provincial government open up their rules around selling alcohol and, allowing the consumer to go down the street to the restaurant and picking up beer and alcohol. But in the past, specifically in Toronto, it's been really hard for restaurants to get patios open. And in the last couple of weeks, Jennifer Keesmaat, one of the municipal leaders, is strongly advocating for those sidewalk patios to open. Do you see them getting any traction there?
Well, it's a great question, and I think I do think that this time, first of all, I think some of the things that the government's done and how quickly they've moved has been pretty amazing. So yes, and the example being allowing restaurants to sell alcohol as part of their takeout and delivery program. I mean, I was amazed at how quickly that happened, because typically it's really a long journey to get anything done, augmenting a license, that kind of stuff. And I also think that even the debate and the discussion, the fact that you asked the question about Uber Eats, there is more understanding now about the plight of the hospitality, the restaurants, how they work. And there's been a bit more exposure to that. And I guess maybe that's the answer to everything, is I think we're going to see different levels. I think the government is going to scramble after this to, how are we going to pay for things, and how are we going to survive? And they're going to have to bend, that there's going to have to be some compromises, and some things are going to have to be made easier. I would say from our side, and I think there'd be a lot of people in the restaurant and hospitality side, when you look at property assessments for taxes, when you look at utility costs, when you look at product costs, minimum wage increases, restrictions for patio sizes so that the sidewalks could be more accessible for people. When you look at all of that, my perspective would be is that there hasn't been enough on the other side to say, okay, the restaurants have been hammered with this, but what have they been given as a quid pro quo or to help benefit them? And I don't think there's been enough of that. And I think that there needs to be more. And hopefully out of this, there will be some easing. And I think it'll have to happen because it's going to take a while. Restaurants will, we've seen that we lag behind other industries as things come back. There are other industries that are horrible. I would hate to be in the cruise industry. Some of the travel and tourism industries are going to be a long time bouncing back. But while retail will probably, when it becomes fully accessible again, the hospitality industry will probably still be another 6 months to a year after that rebounding. The government will have to work. Ian Tossinson, who runs the BC Restaurant Association, and the way the government out there has handled it, I hope that more the federal government and the other provincial governments work with their associations. I think Restaurants Canada is doing a lot of work. And I hope that dialogue happens and we ease up on some of the restrictions so that it is easier to get going with business, and some of those things stay in place and go from there.
So things like, because a lot of restaurants pay the property taxes, even though they don't own the property and they're leasing it. So you're thinking that if they do some property tax breaks and allow them to do interesting things with patios and things like that, that could all lead towards a recovery and a quicker recovery.
Well, I think when I mentioned that, I mean, there's lots around, and Dan may be able to speak on this a bit more than myself, but if you look at, there's lots of things written around how taxes are assessed, especially in sort of the entertainment district or along Yonge Street, where it's not just the building, but it's the future use of the building and the assessments that are on it. And the increase over years have been really disproportionate. There's Le Select Bistro, I think a couple months ago, posted some really great information around that there's a disconnect in terms of the assessments and it's not just a small 100-seat restaurant that's perhaps being assessed. It's the, what are the air rights and the future development of that property really worth and being assessed on that? Or what are condos and buildings around it going for, and it's raising the taxes on certain sites. And it's just, not becoming manageable. And then also, again, you can find lots of information on things that around patios, the restrictions around patios, the licensing cost to it, the fees around those things. So I see you're bringing it up when you look at right there, I think in the span of about a decade, to see them go astronomically in terms of their taxes. I mean, these are not cost of living increases. These are huge fees that they're paying. Anyway, it goes into the grander piece that there are financial stresses, and I think that the operators as well as the governments have to work together to figure out some solutions to create some wins for the industry.
So it's oh my gosh, it went from 2007 to 31,000 to this year, $203,000 in property taxes.
That's offensive.
And the restaurant has to pay that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I don't think their revenue increased by that much. So that's wild. That's absolutely wild.
Yeah, and they're not alone. I think they've been great at being very vocal about it. And I think some of the other sites that post the information have been really good at going out there. And we need to do more of it to understand. You want that local place. You love that local place. Well, let's look at how we can support them. And when you add in minimum wage increases and you grow. It'd be great if we could all be, again, I keep referencing Danny Meyer, but Danny Meyer's a guy in the US that's come out and said, look, we're going to make great restaurants. We're going to have to charge you for it. We're going to get rid of tips. We're going to get rid of all this stuff, but we're going to give a living wage to our team. And we're going to stand by it from a quality standpoint. I think that's an example of, they've figured out a way to get the margins a bit better. Anyway, I think that there's no question though that the government, BC is a great example of where I think it can start to go. And if the government start to work and really look at and understand the fact that, you know, the hospitality industry is such a massive employer, whether you're a student getting a part-time job or you're building a career and you need it to augment your income. We're an industry that we will take you with no skills. You look at the culinary side of things, that we're an industry that will take you from the very beginning and teach you a trade and work all the way up. You know, to be able to create that and also create flexibility while you're doing other things or building other careers. I think that there's still there's an opportunity to recognize us as an employer that way, and to be able to provide more support to be able to help them flourish.
What's happening with the hospitality industry in terms of the hotels in Toronto? What have you been seeing with them?
Were you at Sheraton during SARS or no? I can't remember the timeline.
No, that was after. I was downtown running some restaurants downtown at that time. I mean, you look at, I think similar to other things, I think their occupancy, to have the hotel industry, North America, or at least in Canada, go down to single-digit occupancy is incredible. To have, I think within a day, there was probably 200 hotels closed completely in a day. I mean, I don't know whether that's ever happened, other than perhaps we'd have to go back to the Second World War to really be able to find some comparatives to that. But you know, I think everything that I've been reading, I mean, number one is around social distancing, no touch, and just, you know, what is the health and safety component? And I think a lot of what hotels have been, you know, there's different stages. The first one was the shutdown. And I know that a lot of hotels, as well as the restaurant side, their first focus was, we got to look after our guests. We've got to look after our people. And we've got to make sure people are safe. And these are high traffic, big businesses, high touch, from elevators to common spaces to buffet breakfasts to you name it, all of the cleanliness that goes on. And the hotels that I've worked in and the people I've worked with, it's impressive what the hotel industry does on a daily basis in terms of sanitation and cleanliness. And they've had to go back and relook at all of it and be able to start to dial that back. You know, hats off to the number of hotels that have, you know, at least in the short term, have looked at ways to, how do we protect some people that maybe couldn't get home or couldn't go back to their families, or the number of hotels, you know, like the Royal York, that have done a great job helping frontline workers, where they've made hotel beds available for, if they just can't go home or they need a place to crash during the day, they're going to provide safe haven for these great workers to be able to go back and spend some time there. So, you know, number one is, you know, what will the new normal look like? And, you know, I think earlier you asked the question around, you know, what may change? Well, you know, there's a lot of discussion. Will we have the big breakfast buffets anymore? Will that ever come back? And if it does, what will it look like? You know, will people be comfortable with that idea? You know, I think, you know, that may be something that if it comes back, it may take a long time. But the hotels also are, you know, part of it is that they are held a bit captive, if you will, to a lot of other industries. You know, right away businesses. You know, why? You know, that's a great example at the moment. Even hardened CEOs or presidents that said, we've got to travel, you've got to be here, you've got to be there, are starting to now go, well, we spent 12 weeks getting things done and we didn't need to send anybody anywhere. So how much do we need to do? There's no question that in the short term, people are not going to be wanting to get together for big group training or big group conferences, that those high touch interaction environments are going to be a while before they bounce back. And then you've got travel, you know, in terms of the airlines getting up and international travel, and when will those restrictions come, and when will people feel confident to, you know, start to move forward and get on planes and go places again. I think the big discussion at the moment, and probably as it should be, is it's all about local at the moment. That the assumption will be that People will be driving, so a lot of attention to markets that are within commuting distance, either domestically or feeder markets for us out into the US, where people will feel comfortable driving in. There's a lot of discussion around the travel, outdoor activities, outdoor adventure, because there's a feeling that it's safer, that you could be out doing things without being in an enclosed environment. And when will those restrictions start to lift, and when will those things start to pick up? But I think a lot of the discussion at the moment, again, not being a complete hotel expert, and I'm not currently dialed in with them. I think from what I've read and from the people I've spoken to, it's first and foremost, even if we just have a few guests in the future, what protocols do we need to enhance and put in place so that those guests feel that they know their in-house employees are safe, that the guests are safe, and they can provide the amenities. There's lots of stuff around the luxury front that there's some pretty high touch things that we might expect at a high, whether it's a spa, a gym, certain things like that, that there seems to be the feeling that it'll be a while before those types of services come back. But they're really looking at, what is the health and safety and the sanitary side of that first and foremost. And then as restrictions ease, I think they'll look locally, support and provide options for people that are within their cities or within their provinces and the countries, and look at opportunities within that. I think that'll be the first and foremost. And then a lot of it will then start to come from the businesses. When do businesses start to feel comfortable, and when do their teams start to feel comfortable to go to a convention again or to do business travel? Which of those businesses have to start doing some travel and start to move around? And then what does accommodation look like from that, and slowly build it back up again?
Do you think that's the number one, sorry to interrupt, Brian, do you think that's the number one priority that restaurant operators need to focus on in terms of getting people back when Ontario allows it, is that they've reinstated new protocols for safety, and that their guests and their teams will be safe when they come to whatever restaurant? Do you think that's the number one focus right now? Like, how are they going to get butts and seats again?
Yeah, well, one of the things I would go back to say that, years and years ago, I was at a conference and a couple of people got up and spoke about, the number one killer that our industry could have is if a guest came into the restaurant and felt that the food wasn't safe. As a consumer, it would kill the industry if you didn't trust that the food you're eating or going into the environment was safe to eat. And so, when you say, is this the focus that we have to have now? I believe it's been our focus all along. Yeah, I think part of it is we have to be more transparent to the public and to the guests that come in as to all of the practices that we do. Most guests wouldn't, and nor should they know that we have to have certified health and safety people trained on site every single day, that there's certifications that we go through, that the majority of restaurants have opening procedures and closing procedures, and they do temperature checks, and they look at anything from allergy awareness and dietary training, everything from sanitation and CrossFit, like the gambit that the majority of anyone in the food service, the protocols they have in place, they've always been there. And so part of it is letting the public know, hey, these are all the things we're doing. Is there a more of a focus towards it now? Are there things now because of this that perhaps are put in place over and above, where we're perhaps cleaning high touch areas more frequently than we did before? Is there perhaps some more deep cleaning protocols that we're putting in? Most certainly, and because first and foremost, I don't think that you'd speak to anybody that number one is thinking about their own team. They want their own teams to feel safe and comfortable coming to work, because they have their own fears of coming in, and they're going out into the world and they have to come home to their teams and they're going out into the public. So number one, we want them to feel comfortable coming in, and have we set up and checked all those balances. And so some of it's retraining on things that we're already doing. And then secondly, we want to make sure that the guests feel safe. that we're coming out and, that they're not going to get exposed to something. And so part of it is showing them. That's why you're going to see on social media, you're probably going to see a lot more of people with masks and gloves making your food and talking about the protocols. You're going to see more posters. You're going to see more things put out on the floor to give people confidence that, we're putting everything in place, and that you can rest assured that if you come and order something in a restaurant, that team has done everything in their power to make sure that it's wonderful and it's safe for you. So I think it's always been an important focus. And yes, first and foremost, they want to make sure that it's safe moving forward. And then they're trying to figure out what do we have to do to get back into business so that they can keep people employed, that they can keep their guests happy. And how do we figure that out with this sort of no touch or lower touch type of thing, and pivot and offer new offerings and change things up a little bit so that they can start making some money and move forward.
So in a nutshell, we're in an unprecedented time. We definitely don't know how it's going to play out, when it's going to be coming back, how it's going to be coming back. In a nutshell, what should people be doing to kind of help out restaurants? Should they be reaching out to them, ordering takeout? Should they message their MPP? Should they message their counselor to say, hey, we got to figure out these property taxes? What should people do? And when do you expect things to get back to normal, in your personal opinion?
Wow, that's a big question. So, I think that you've touched on a bunch of things. I mean, the number one thing I would recommend is reach out to your favorite restaurant. Talk to them. I think that you go and say, hey, we love you. We love coming there. And I think there's great examples every day where we're seeing that where guests are reaching out and ask them. A simple thing about that is that, a lot of restaurants, boy, if you could place the order with them and go pick it up, well, there's no commission to that. If you order directly to them and you go and pick it up, there's no commission fee to them. They're making some money off it. It's great. If you're able to go and buy gift cards for now and have it for the future, awesome. That it gives them some cash now. And some restaurants are doing great things where if you buy gift cards with them now, they're giving that directly to their teams and to their employees as a way to, help them to augment different things. I think, but reaching out directly to, the restaurant or retail and saying, hey, how can we help? What could we do? And if the simple answer is, it'd be great if you were ordering, or, we've got this great basket, you can come pick it up, or, yeah, you can order through that third party or order through our own online. I would say number one is contact them directly. They're going to make more money. They're going to love hearing from you. Hospitality people are in the hospitality industry. They love talking to guests, and they're going to tell you, they're going to be so grateful. You're going to give them a boost by just calling and saying, hey, we still love you. We're hanging in. What can we do to help? And I think that's number one. Go local and stay in your neighborhood, and wherever you can, look at those local places. And if you can do a takeout order with them, even if it is by a third party, that's you can't get out and you need it brought in, fine. But yeah, support your locals. But reach out to them. I think would be the number one. Talk to them and say, hey, how can we help you? And how can we support you, and work with them on it? And we're seeing all kinds of creative stuff. We've seen some. There's a great restaurant, or it's not so much a restaurant, but Andy Elder, he owns a place in Leaside called Grill Time. He is so in touch with his consumers. He's not only selling meats, but he's now selling grocery baskets, and he's arranging pickup times. He's talking to them about how to make it safe to pick things up. He's a great example of a small entrepreneur that's gotten to know his community. His community's helping him. He's helping them. So I think it's examples like that. And keep dining out. And as the restrictions ease, don't be afraid to come out. I mean, when you're ready, get out there and slowly, let's get back to getting busy with them and give the operators feedback.
Appreciate your time. Dan, do you have anything to add?
You've been a 30+ year advocate and ambassador of the restaurant business, and you continue to be one. Brian and I thank you very much for your time. As we mentioned, Terry Secord runs a consultants group called North Coast Restaurants. You can find him on Instagram, Facebook, or look him up. You'll see him anywhere in the internet. Thank you again, Terry, for your time.
Thanks, guys, for having me, and thanks for having a discussion around the industry. We're all in this together. We're not the only industry that's hurting at the moment, but I think any exposure, anything that can help the industry get back on its feet again is well appreciated. So thank you, both of you.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. Take care. Bye, Dan. Have a great
See you
one,
guys.
folks. Take care.
Bye.